The Len Bias story is the greatest what-if in NBA history. The ultimate ripple effect. The alternate reality's alternate reality.
I played against Len Bias when he was a sophomore in college, and he was incredible.
Yeah, I'm in the NBA now. I've got drafted, so now my dream has come true.
I mean, Michael Jordan might never have become the icon we know today, and the Boston Celtics could have dominated the late 80s and 90s instead of falling apart.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
There he is, Len Bias, and many people think he may be the best athlete in the draft. Now he's going to the world champion.
Nothing would have been the same. But I'm telling you, this isn't fantasy. This was a very real possibility until tragedy struck. On June 19th, 1986, the 22-year-old Bias from the University of Maryland overdosed just 2 days after being drafted by the Boston Celtics.
I've been here 10 years, and I've never seen a day as dark and sad as this one.
County emergency.
Len Bias, you have to give him back to life. There's no way he can die. He's so clean.
His success story has ended in tragedy with his sudden death at the age of 22.
We're diving deep into the story of the man who many believe could have changed the entire landscape of basketball, if only he'd gotten a chance. Leonard Kevin Bias was born on November 18, 1963 in Washington, D.C., but grew up in Landover, Maryland. From day one, Len was just different, standing 6'8" with incredible athleticism and a work ethic that bordered on obsession. He was the kind of kid who'd spend hours alone in the gym, perfecting his craft while other kids were playing video games. At Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland, Bias was already showing glimpses of greatness. As a senior, he averaged 23 points and 12 rebounds per game, leading his team to the state championship. But here's what made Len special. He wasn't just physically gifted. Coaches described him as having an almost supernatural basketball IQ and the kind of competitive fire that separated good players from legends. College recruiters were lining up at his door, but Len had his heart set on staying close to home, choosing to go just a mile up the road to the University of Maryland, a decision that would make him a local hero and set the stage for one of the most dominant college careers anyone had ever seen. When Bias stepped onto the court at Maryland in 1982, the Terrapins were a decent team, looking for something special to push them over the edge. What they got was a basketball phenomenon who would redefine what it meant to dominate at the college level. By his sophomore year, Bias was already the best player in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and that's saying something in a league that included Michael Jordan at North Carolina. The battles between Maryland and UNC became the stuff of legend. In their first matchup, Bias outscored MJ 24-21, but the Tar Heels came out victorious against the 5th-ranked Terps. And in the second matchup that same season, the future NBA GOAT came out on top once again, scoring 25 points to Bias's 18 as the Heels clinched the ACC regular season title. Bias would later get his revenge against Carolina as a senior, scoring 35 points as Maryland erased a double-digit deficit to hand number 1 ranked UNC its first loss in the brand new Dean Smith Center. That game is considered one of the greatest upsets in college basketball history. But Bias's true college signature moment came a few weeks earlier against number 2 ranked Duke. Bias took over the game completely. He dropped a career-high 41 points, and even though Maryland lost, Blue Devils coach Mike Krzyzewski maintains it was the greatest performance by a visiting player he's ever witnessed.
He had the purest jump shot I've ever seen. The purest, straight up, off the floor, perfect form, perfect elbow, perfect release point, perfect follow-through, and it was a vision. It was a work of art.
Sometimes it would seem as if he was embarrassed by his ability, because you'd watch him and he would always have it would almost be a two-handed slam dunk, and he would do it like this, and he'd bring his hands back, and he'd run just a few steps like that as if to say, I'm sorry, but this is what I've been given. This is what I do.
Len Bias, as a player, as I remember, was a consummate inside-outside force, a truly exciting player to watch.
Mike Krzyzewski said there were 2 defining players in his time as a coach in the ACC at Duke, and they were Michael Jordan and Len Bias. And of course, that sounds like incredible praise, unbelievable praise, but for those of us who watched Len Bias play night after night, it wasn't unbelievable, it was very believable.
Bias, 2 of the finest athletes athletes in the country. Michael Jordan and Bias going up side by side. Bias just out.
They both played with a rage, controlled rage. Almost anger, but it wasn't anger, because if it's anger, then it's sort of destructive, and it wasn't destructive.
But notice how he gets under control, and then he goes up strong. You like to see your big guys do that. That's a big basket.
All in all, the numbers tell the story. As a senior, Bias averaged 23.2 points and 7 rebounds per game, shooting over 54% from the field. He was named ACC Player of the Year twice and finished his college career with 2,146 points, still a Maryland record to this day. But statistics only tell part of this story. What made Len special wasn't just his ability to score, it was how he elevated everyone around him. Maryland went from an average program to a legitimate national championship contender. Teammates described playing with Len as knowing you had a superhero on your team. So as the senior season wound down and the NBA draft approached, scouts were unanimous. Len Bias was gonna be a superstar at the next level. But let's just say that sadly, Superman had a kryptonite. June 17th, 1986, NBA draft night. The Boston Celtics had just finished an incredible season, winning 67 games in their third championship in 6 years. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish, the big three, were getting older, and general manager Red Auerbach knew the team needed to start planning for the future. And Auerbach had strategically made a trade 2 years earlier in 1984 with the Seattle Supersonics when he traded guard Gerald Henderson in cash considerations to Seattle for a future first-round pick. That pick ended up being the number 2 overall in 1986. And so that year, the Celtics made a choice that sent shockwaves through the basketball world. They selected Len Bias from the University of Maryland.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
There he is, Len Bias, and many people think he may be the best athlete in the draft. Now he's going to the world champions.
So really think about this for a second. The Celtics weren't rebuilding. They were at the peak of their powers. The 1986 team is considered one of the greatest to ever do it. They didn't need help immediately. They were planning 3 to 4 years ahead. That's how special they believed Len Bias was gonna be. And Auerbach, who had watched every great player from Bill Russell to Larry Bird, called Bias, quote, the most gifted player I've ever evaluated. The fit was perfect. Bias had the athleticism to run with the younger, faster teams that were starting to emerge, but also the basketball IQ and work ethic that matched Celtic tradition. Larry Bird himself said after the draft, quote, if this kid is half as good as everyone says he is, we're going to be scary good for a long time. ESPN's draft coverage that night focused heavily on how the Celtics had potentially just extended their championship window by another decade. The headline in the Boston Globe the next morning read, "The future is now. Bias brings youth to championship core." For 2 days, everything was perfect. Len Bias was living his dream, and the basketball world was buzzing about what this partnership could mean. But sometimes, the cruelest tragedies happen when everything seems to be going right.
County emergency. 1103 Washington Hall. It's an emergency. It's Len Bias. And he just went to Boston.
June 19th, 1986. 2 days after achieving his lifelong dream of being drafted by his favorite team, Len Bias was back on the University of Maryland campus, celebrating with friends. What happened that night has been debated and analyzed for nearly 4 decades, but the facts are clear. Bias suffered cardiac arrhythmia induced by cocaine use and died at 6:32 a.m. at Leland Memorial Hospital.
County emergency. I'd like to have an ambulance come. What room? 1103 Washington Hall. It's an emergency. It's Len Bias. And he just went to Boston, and he needs some assistance. What are you talking about? Huh? What are you talking about? I'm talking about someone needs, Len Bias needs help. Well, it doesn't matter what his name is. What's the problem? He's not breathing right. You're giving him mouth to mouth. You can hear it now. This is Len Bias. You have to get him back to life. There's no way he can die. Seriously, sir. Please come quick.
He was 22 years old. The news hit the sports world like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just the death of a promising young athlete. This was the death of unlimited potential. Within hours, every major news network was covering the story.
Imagine an All-American basketball star. Imagine having the current NBA champions, the Boston Celtics, make you their #1 pick in the college draft. That is the stuff of dreams for a 22-year-old, and that is what happened to Len Bias. But the dream ends there. Len Bias died Thursday morning of what doctors believe was a heart attack.
The Boston Celtics, who had been planning their future around Bias, were devastated. Larry Bird broke down in tears during a press conference. Auerbach himself, the tough-as-nails executive who had built multiple championship teams, was so shaken he couldn't speak publicly for days. But the impact went far beyond basketball. Bias's death became a catalyst for major changes in how America dealt with drug policy. Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 partly in response to his death, establishing much harsher penalties for drug offenses. His death became a cautionary tale that echoed through sports and society for years to come. But back to the NBA, because the basketball world was left to wonder, what if Len Bias had made different choices that night? What if he had simply gone home after the celebration? The ripple effects of that one tragic night would reshape basketball history in ways no one could have imagined. Here's the thing about Len Bias. His death didn't just rob us of one great player, it changed the entire trajectory of basketball history. Think about the Boston Celtics. Without Bias, their aging core of Bird, McHale, and Parrish had no succession plan. Bird's back problems, which might have been manageable with a younger, more athletic teammate to share the load, became devastating. By 1992, the Big Three era was over, and the Celtics entered one of the longest championship droughts in franchise history. But the impact also went even beyond Boston. Without the Celtics remaining dominant in the late 80s and early 90s, Michael Jordan's path to 6 championships became much clearer. The Chicago Bulls' biggest threat in the East essentially eliminated itself. Would Jordan have won 6 titles if he had to go through a Celtics team featuring Len Bias in his prime? What about the bad boy Pistons? Would they have won 2 titles? Many basketball historians believe the answer is no. On a personal level, those who knew Len best say his death taught them about the fragility of dreams and the importance of the choices we make. And perhaps most importantly, Len Bias became a symbol of potential, both realized and lost. Every great college player who enters the NBA draft is compared to him in some way. Every tragic story of a young athlete making poor choices references his name. His death forced the basketball community to confront uncomfortable truths about pressure, expectations, and the responsibility that comes with being gifted. Len Bias played his last basketball game on March 16, 1986 in the NCAA tournament. He was 22 years old at the absolute peak of his powers and seemingly destined for greatness. In the nearly 4 decades since his death, basketball has evolved in countless ways, but his story remains as relevant as ever. On the University of Maryland campus, Bias's number 34 is the most popular jersey worn by students at games to this day. And in the NBA, when we watch players like Jason Tatum or Kevin Durant, tall, athletic forwards who can do everything on the court, we're seeing the blueprint that Len Bias helped create. He was ahead of his time in the best way possible, showing what the modern NBA player could become. But more than his basketball legacy, Len Bias represents something deeper, the reminder that our choices define us more than our talents ever could. Decision making is humanity's great equalizer. His story isn't just about what could have been, it's about what is right now in this moment with the choices we make today. The man who could have changed everything did change everything, just not in the way anyone expected. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important lesson of them all.